Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh, Part 28. Karachi is to Pakistan what Bombay is to India. Cosmopolitan, hedonistic, business minded, suspicious of Delhi or Islamabad officialdom, wealthy and anthropologically interesting. Both cities served dinner past midnight. Both boasted hostesses who added finesse to hospitality unsurpassed anywhere. Sindhi Vaderas led luxurious lives. Pathans all but controlled the truck business. Baluch tribesmen looked fierce with their garments and guns. Murder was common, recourse to courts rare. The tribe killed, the tribe provided justice. The Mujahirs kept alive the language of Lucknow. The Sabri brothers excelled in that exceptional art form, the Qawwali. And Ahmed Ali was the epitome of Delhi's rich culture, immortalized by him in Twilight in Delhi. I first met Ahmed Ali in Peking in July 1956. He had come with Prime Minister Hussein Shahid Suhrawardi. When we met in London in 1976, he had no recollection of that forgettable occasion. When I was ambassador to Pakistan, we met often. The rebel had become an establishment figure. I used to pull his leg about this. He died in Karachi at the age of 84. Karachi's prominent citizens in my time included Begum Liaquat Ali Khan, a Christian who converted to Islam after she married Nawabjada Liaquat Ali Khan. She was sent as ambassador to several countries where she entertained in the style and scale of Vijayalakshmi Pandit, flouting most budgetary considerations. She was an aging prima donna who had to be kept in good humor. Professor I. M. Qureshi, a great pre 1947 protagonist of Pakistan, was no longer mobile. I saw him once in the Naval Hospital in Karachi. A staunch supporter of Jinnah, he was not remembered by many Pakistanis. But Zia ul Haq kept in touch with him. Qureshi had taught Zia at St. Stephen's. There was Sharbaj Khan Majari, a sophisticated tribal lord, handsome, an epicure, a voracious reader, and a gentleman politician who deserved to go far but did not. The Hafiz Pirzada made a stunning good looking couple and provided excellent conversation and delicious food. It was difficult not to fall for the lady's charm and beauty. The Jatois, the Haruns, the Daulatanas maintained princely establishments and belonged to the 22 families who once possessed almost 30% wealth of Pakistan. Their lifestyle made a mockery of the French and Russian revolutions. They only ate cake. Bread was for the lesser breeds. All were in politics, in and out of provincial and national cabinets. From 1981 onwards, Jia followed a two-track policy towards India. He launched a peace offensive towards India, the aim of which was to convince not only the Islamic world but other countries as well that Pakistan was making genuine efforts to maintain good neighborly relations. On the other hand, he did everything he could to erode our influence and continually accused us of exercising hegemony over the entire SARC region. While we had no choice but to deal with the man in authority, I felt at the time that it was important that we avoid giving the people of Pakistan the impression that we were accepting Jia setup. I believe that our aim should be to speak more about the people of Pakistan rather than about the government. I now accept that my perception was wholly wrong. The citizens almost always support their country's foreign policy. During my tenure, Indo-Pak relations were correct but not cordial, and from time to time they became strained. I had several meetings with General Jia when the US gifted F 16 planes to Pakistan. He told me with unusual asperity, Kumar Sahib, you are getting much more from the Soviet Union. Without being disrespectful, I asked why Pakistan needed such a large army and an excessively bloated defense budget. After the birth of Bangladesh, both the army and the budget should have been reduced. His answer was along expected lines. Our problem is India. Half of your army is facing our border. Without entering into an argument, I reminded him that India faced military hostility from Pakistan and China, hence the large army. Jia and I frequently assaulted each other with good manners. He was an expert at dissimulation, which he combined with a natural courtesy. And when it came to the question of Kashmir, he was implacable. He once said to me, Kumar Sahib, Kashmir is in my blood. Sir, Kashmir is in my bone marrow, I replied. It was a mutually fruitless play of words. On the surface, the President always showed great regard for me and emphasized his desire to maintain good neighborly relations with India. But I knew through our own intelligence agencies that Pakistan was doing to needle India. One evening, a banner headline was broadcast in a cinema hall stating that a member of the Indian embassy had been killed in a motor car accident. 2 or 3 families from our embassy were present in the hall. They rushed out as soon as they saw this horrifying news item, but found that there was no truth to it, and every member of our staff was safe. At times, even more ridiculous situations developed. One day, my deputy S.K. Lamba was called to the Foreign Office and informed that two diplomatic officials of the embassy were being declared persona non grata as they were involved in unlawful activities harmful to the state of Pakistan. Their names were Santosh Kumar, the first secretary, and Major V.H. Rao, our medical officer. Lamba and I were both amused because neither of them had anything whatsoever to do with intelligence work. We, of course, felt concerned about our colleagues because their life would be disrupted. For Major Rao, it was a tragedy. He would never get another foreign posting. There was yet another incident which caused great furor in India, both in Parliament and in the press. I had sought permission from the Foreign Office to visit Wali Khan, the son of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Not only was Wali Khan well known to India, he had many friends in the country too. He lived in his family village Charsada, not far from Peshawar. Permission was refused to me. Someone in my office informed the BBC representative in Islamabad, and the news was broadcast all over the region. India reacted strongly to the refusal of permission. Pakistan had not expected this, and after a few weeks, I was able to meet Wali Khan. The Pakistan government had put him in prison several times, but he hadn't agreed to any of the compromises offered to him and had maintained his almost complete control over the Pashtuns. During the 3 hours I spent with him, he gave me a detailed assessment of the current situation in Pakistan. He told me that President Ziaul Haq had asked the governor of the frontier province to meet Wali and offer him the prime ministership of Pakistan. Wali refused because one of his conditions, that the army be sent back to the barracks, was denied. He had a commanding personality and a sense of humor. I got to know him fairly intimately. He inquired about Indira Gandhi, whom he had known well before partition. He gave me a handwritten letter for her, which I passed on. I was grateful to have his overview of Jia's government and his policies. Ziaul Haq was keen that Pakistan become a West Asian country, but the Arabs, though friendly, were not willing to include the country in the grouping. His relations with Saudi Arabia were extremely close, and several regiments of the armed forces of Pakistan were serving in Saudi Arabia. Ziaul Haq himself had been there at one time. Wali said that both India and Pakistan carried a lot of baggage which did not allow either a free roll to follow a consistent policy. The residual problems of partition remained. One brother was buried in India, the other in Pakistan. One daughter of a family was married to an Indian and an Indian to a Pakistani. Many holy places of the Sikhs were in Pakistan, including Nankana Sahib and Panja Sahib. For the Pakistanis, Nijamuddin Dargah and Ajmer Sharif in India were places of pilgrimage. While it was impossible for any Sikh or indeed any Indian to get lost in Pakistan, it was very easy for Pakistani pilgrims to disappear in India. Wali Khan was a worthy son of a worthy father, fearless, courageous, defiant, and charismatic with an engaging personality. I returned more than satisfied with my visit to Charsada and greatly valued my meeting with a man of such distinction. I met President Jia more frequently than any other ambassador, with the exception of the ones from Saudi Arabia and the US. In one meeting, he was in a very relaxed mood, and I ventured to ask him if he had any doubts about Pakistan being an Islamic state, as he frequently emphasized that he was Muslim and Pakistan was an Islamic country. I was a Hindu, but I did not find it necessary to flaunt my religion. He responded in mock horror. Kumar Sahib, how can you say such a thing? I am a Sunni Muslim and my Muslimaniyat should not be questioned. I want to introduce Islam in Pakistan in the true sense. Our present political edifice is based on system of the West which has no place in Islam. This country was created in the name of Islam. In Islam, there is no provision for Western type of elections. I was walking on my terrace one day when my servant came and told me the president is on the line. When I took the call, President Jia, after inquiring about my health, asked me if I was free to have dinner with him that night. I agreed. He said, could you also give me a list of names of your friends? I replied, sir, your intelligence agency already has the names of my friends. As for the one or two who aren't on the list, I would like you to spare them. Thank you for listening. Both cities served dinner past midnight. Both boasted hostesses who added finesse to hospitality unsurpassed anywhere. FINESSE, finesse means great skill or style. Begum Liaquat Ali Khan was sent as ambassador to several countries where she entertained in the style and scale of Vijayalakshmi Pandit, flouting most budgetary considerations. She was an aging prima donna who had to be kept in good humor. PRIMADONNA, prima donna means someone who demands to be treated in a special way and difficult to be pleased. There was Shahbaz Khan Majari, a sophisticated tribal lord, handsome, an epicure, a voracious reader, and a gentleman politician who deserved to go far but did not. Epicure, EPICURE. Epicure means a person who enjoys high quality food and drink. During my tenure, Indo-Pak relations were correct but not cordial, and from time to time they became strained. I had several meetings with General Jial when the US gifted F-16 planes to Pakistan. He told me with unusual asperity, Kumar Sahib, you are getting much more from the Soviet Union. ASPERATY, asperity means harshness of tone or manner. Jia and I frequently assaulted each other with good manners. He was an expert at dissimulation, which he combined with a natural courtesy. DISSIMULATION. Dissimulation means trying to conceal one's thoughts or feelings. And when it came to the question of Kashmir, he was implacable. IMPLACABLE, implacable. Unable to be appeased or placated. One day, My deputy S.K. Lamba was called to the Foreign Office and informed that two diplomatic officials of the embassy were being declared persona non grata. PERSONA persona, NON non, GRATA grata. Persona non grata means an unacceptable or unwelcome person. Thank you very much.